Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Prieto, and I'm the co-founder of Seeds of Tao, alongside my husband, Joshua Prieto. If you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast for impact entrepreneurs creating regenerative enterprises. We often get asked what exactly a regenerative enterprise or impact entrepreneur is. So if you're wondering, a regenerative enterprise builds triple bottom line profits through the practice of ethics and principles that lead to a more inclusive, fair, and balanced economy. Impact entrepreneurs, or regenpreneurs as we like to call them, are those willing and able to take on the financial and personal risks of starting and building regenerative enterprises. You'll get to know exactly what all that means as you join us for this and future episodes, but know that we welcome everyone to join us as we work to build regenerative economies together. That's exactly why we're doing what we do at Seeds of Tao. Our mission is to help establish regenerative economies in every bioregion by serving individual regenpreneurs like yourself. In this podcast, you'll hear the startup stories in all their glory from impact entrepreneurs all over the globe. You'll learn and grow the skills of building a regenerative enterprise from your peers, mentors, and leaders. Finally, we'll get to know each other as you engage in the podcast and join the wonderful regenerative business economies ecosystem, aka Regen B, an open community where peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenpreneurs come together to build the regenerative economies of the future. Join us every month for a wonderful episode as we collectively move beyond sustainability and into our regenerative future. It all starts now.
Hello, welcome to the most recent episode of Seeds of Tao podcast. I'm Noam Rifkin, and I'm joined by Joshua Prieto. Say hi, Josh.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing well. I hope you are as well. I hope all our listeners are too. Let's get into the intro. We have a great conversation coming up today with Tom Rosenberg. Tom's a growth professional and an entrepreneur, very much focused on personal and professional leadership development within the regenerative space. This was a really interesting conversation that I can't wait to share with everybody. For me, and I'll kind of set the stage a little bit, Josh, and maybe you can give a little more context before we jump into the conversation. But I've talked about before that before coming to this regenerative space, I worked for over a decade in the kind of digital marketing, startup, e-commerce, grow fast, move fast, and break things kind of world, right? And during that time, I went from valued individual contributor to team leader to team builder to department leader. And throughout a lot of that time, I noticed a lot of things only in retrospect, a lot of, what I could only describe now as warning signs. Stomach ache 24/7, poor sleep, lots of stress, manifesting physically and backaches and, confusion and, depression eventually. And, when I finally made the decision to leave digital marketing behind, it was in large part because I was pretty burnt out from that grind and that misalignment of wanting to see my team and the people in my team that make up my team grow and thrive in the ways that they wanted to, that were helpful to them, that they were interested in, and not just asking them to be a cog in the wheel and produce as many widgets as possible in their 40 hours that I was paying for. And that inherent tension between what I wanted to achieve with my team and what I needed to achieve in my role was a big part, I think, in retrospect, of why I kind of moved away. So, Josh, I know you had this conversation a little while ago, but maybe you can give our listeners a little bit more context about Tom's approach to leadership development in particular, but any other highlights that we might want to look out for.
Yeah, so this is something that also has impacted me quite a bit in my career. I do also and that's one thing that both of us kind of share, is that digital marketing background and branding, and really the hustle and grind that comes with that business as usual, grow baby grow type of life that a lot of us, especially in Northern America, US and Canada, we kind of fit into those very similar, like we're just grinding. We were joking a little bit, I think, last week with the friends we have and colleagues that we have in Europe, and they're taking a lot of summer breaks right now. And it's like, man, we don't even feel like we can take those summer breaks. Like, it's kind of a funny dynamic when you kind of look at the leadership that you're trying to exude within the regenerative business world, where we're trying to create these regenerative outcomes, but then we totally neglect ourselves, right? And that is so typical within business. And what the conversation kind of brings in here, and with Thomas's work and his story and journey, is really about how do we kind of trust ourselves to begin to understand and sense what's going on within our body that actually helps us to make choices within our life, right? If we're having these things that we just don't feel right on, and they're not leading to the right outcomes, they present themselves in our bodies. I used to have ulcers for a time when I was working in my branding agency. A lot of that was an extreme amount of stress that I was putting on myself. Another part of it is I was neglecting a huge part of who I was in that business that I was building, right? And because of that, over time, it just added up, and it created so many different things that I had to move away. And so when we get into this conversation, for those that are entrepreneurs in this space, for those that are leaders in a regenerative business, this is really about self understanding, and then how that helps us to create better choices for ourselves, and then it leads to better choices for a regenerative organization. We have to be regenerative ourselves personally in our lives and so forth, to be able to make the regenerative outcomes that we want happen in our businesses. So that's my 2 cents before we dive into this, Noam, and thanks for bringing this discovery into a more personal aspect as well.
Great context. I think a lot of us out there, whether directly or just one step removed, have seen people in our circles, if not ourselves, deal with a lot of these same problems and issues. There's nothing that says hustle is bad, but it's got to be balanced. And I think this conversation with Tom does a great job of helping you see those moments where you are coming out of balance or out of alignment for yourself, and giving you hopefully some strategies and ways to deal with it. But at least awareness is that first step, right? Because it's become to the point where that hustle is not, it's just table stakes. It's not even rewarded anymore. It's just to be expected, right? If you're not hustling, then everyone who's competing against you can assume is hustling. So it's hard to find that balance of wanting to achieve your mission, but not wanting to completely consume yourself from the inside out in doing so. So with that said, why don't we jump into the conversation?
Let's do it. Thomas Rosenberg is with me. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me on the show, Joshua.
It's good to have you. So for the listeners today, tell us a bit about your day, where you're calling in from. Let's get to know you a little bit before we dive into your story.
Sure. So I am on Ohlone land here in Oakland, California. And my day has actually started off a little smoky because the wind's turned and we're getting smoke from the wildfires up on the Oregon border.
Wow. That's sad that it's becoming a seasonal thing now, that we just expect our skies to be dark in certain areas of the world because of fires or smell the smoke. And yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah, but I'm grateful that this is really, we had in June, I think it was, we had a couple of days where it was a little bad. It was, you could smell a little bit on the air, but it cleared out pretty quickly today and yesterday, and tomorrow are supposed to be the worst. So may it clear out quickly, and grateful that the fires aren't bigger so far this year, because they could be.
Yeah, it's true. We've definitely seen some really difficult fires in your neck of the woods and areas. I'm from Utah, and we would get a lot of wildfires, but we'd also live in a valley in my area, and we get all that air pollution just would linger in our valley, and it would take a good storm to blow it out. So I think the whole West kind of suffers, and I know Canada's having a hard time right now.
Yes.
So
it's one of the worst, and then there's Greece, but yes, wildfires. It's there was a term I heard recently. It's not just global warming; it's global boiling or something like that. So yeah.
Yes. It's not just global warming at all. It's all sorts of things, right?
It's real. I mean, just to underscore the crisis, but yes, that we're in at the moment. Yeah.
Well, it's good to have you. What you're actually, it's your afternoon, right? So
yep.
What got you up this morning? What gets you going?
What gets me going in the morning? The possibility to seed new possibility in the world. I feel like that's part of why I'm a coach. So I know we'll be getting into this later, but I'm a somatic coach. And for me, what I'm passionate about is really helping people reconnect to themselves. The ethos of my work is reconnect to yourself so we can more easily connect to each other, so we can reconnect to the planet.
And it's one of the big things that I think a lot of us in the regenerative business and regenerative entrepreneurs, we understand the importance of that, but it's not necessarily something that's we're on top of on our own personal lives, right? Or there's moments that we are, and there's moments that we're not, and we could always be doing a little bit better. So I want to explore that a little bit more. Tell us a bit about the work that you're doing, why you're doing it, and then we can dive into the storytelling side of it, like how you actually came to this work, right?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, just now, I'm a somatic coach, and I work on executive leadership development with executives in small or mid-sized organizations, as individuals, and in peer teams. And what I am, the psychographics of those folks are those who are kind, who are collaborative, innately curious, and really want to help others grow. And they're interested in supporting that growth in others, whether that's team or specifically or beyond that team across the organization. Those are the folks that I really enjoy working with the most. And I am working with them to reconnect them to what's most important to them and helping them. One of the things in somatic coaching, the way that I was trained, is that we start with a declaration. So this is a commitment to your future self. What would it be like to live this way in a year? What do you yearn for most? And really connecting with that. And that works both individually and in a team situation. What does the team want to feel like, be like, walk through the world like in a year? And so that can be a really powerful question that sets the North Star for the entire engagement. And, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do, my underlying belief behind all of this is, how can we support people in bringing their full self and sharing all of their unique gifts fully with the world? So some of that's inside an organization, but many times it flows over into other areas. So that might be as a parent, as a spouse, as a community member, a community leader, whatever, however they choose to take it. But it's really coming back to yourself. And so, since we're talking about regenerative models and permaculture, et cetera, this is really where it comes to, is what is it? How can we seat ourselves? How can we reconnect to what matters most? And how can we provide space for that to flourish so that we're showing up in a way that aligns with our values and vision?
Yeah. And so I'm for the audience and for me as well, I want to maybe explore this a little bit further before we dive into your story of some of the ways this shows up in our decision making in our personal lives, and then also into our business lives. Because if I am more in tune with my feelings, my understandings, my body, how does that help me to make decisions in my personal life? And then how does that show up in my as I'm working in with my colleagues in my business or with a business partner? Help us explore that a little bit.
Sure. So there's a variety of different ways that we can do this. So one way is just, first of all, to look at the neuroscience, right? In our society, we grow up and we stay in the head and we just spin in the head.
Yeah.
And we supposedly, we have this fallacy that we make decisions from the head. However, every marketer will tell you, you make decisions emotionally.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you're not connected to your heart, if you're not connected to your gut, then you're missing a lot of the information, the majority of the information about your surroundings. And we are constantly, getting back to the neuroscience, our gut is constantly searching the environment for safety or threat multiple times a second.
Mm-hmm.
So you might meet somebody, say, at a networking event, or you're just striking up a casual conversation at a friend's party, and you're like, oh, this is an interesting person. And then something all of a sudden clicks. You're like, ooh, okay, maybe I'm not as safe as I thought I was. But you feel it viscerally. Mm-hmm. And you're responding to that viscerally. And then you're making a decision from it before your rational brain even has a chance to process what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then to overlay that, we, as young children, we create patterns that protect us from overwhelm. And so we walk through the world with these habituated patterns, and we keep practicing them because they keep us safe.
Mm-hmm.
But we sometimes get to a place in life where we realize, okay, that might have worked when I was 3, but it doesn't serve me now. And yet you still find yourself making these knee-jerk reactions. And so, at the beginning of the recording, for example, you had a center. And the beauty about coming back to center, because we are always distracted with something. It's like, oh, a fly on my nose, or that call, or I have to write this email, or there's something else. What are we going to do for dinner? All of these things are pulling us off center. And so coming back to center gives us more opportunity to respond in an appropriate manner for the situation, regardless of the emotion that's running through us, the anger, the frustration, the anxiety, whatever it happens to be. And so by being more connected with what's going on in your body, you can say, oh, okay, there's this story, right? I'm not in that situation anymore. I don't need to respond that way. Okay, what would really serve this situation now?
Yes.
And what's coming to mind, maybe this is best illustrated by just a brief case study. But for example, I had one client, and he was moving into a much more senior role in the organization, starting to lead more and more people. And it was kind of his entry point into the executive team of his organization. And he came to me basically asking, get me this promotion.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I don't have, I'm not the hiring manager,
Yes, that's a lot to put on you.
Right. It's like, I'm outside the organization in case you didn't know this, but no, in all seriousness though, but what he was doing in that moment, and this is what we worked through, especially in the first few months together, was he was this little kid going, oh, me, what me? Like the little kid who has to answer the question in school.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I have the answer. And I got him to a place where I said, what if you didn't need to have the right answer? However the conversation unfolded, I said, what if you were the person in the room who had the question that brought it back to the underlying reason the meeting was called?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that starts to change how you're showing up and how you're making decisions, because he was playing with this, see me, see me, see me. I need to be seen, rather than trusting himself, rather than holding his own axis, his own line of dignity.
Mm-hmm.
He was pulling himself off, trying to be seen, rather than just saying, I'm here. I trust what I'm feeling. And this is, so it's a real shift in the narrative that you're showing up and how others start to perceive you. And as that shift started to really take root, people responded to him differently, and they stopped seeing him as a junior wannabe and as an upcoming senior partner to be. As in partnership, not so much as like a partner in a firm, but just like as a partner, that someone, a colleague, a collaborator of equal.
Right. That was really helpful for me, and I hope for the audience as well, to be able to see more clearly how us showing up in our self, in our body, understanding our emotions, understanding how they're acting with our physiology, really does help us in both the personal and professional and beyond. Right.
Yeah.
I always thought it was the most woo-woo thing when I was first introduced to it from my wife, but we muscle test around here. Right. And we try to understand what our body is telling us in those micro movements and those types of things. And for the longest time, I was like, why is this working? Because it does. And I have no clue. And it's so woo-woo it feels, and for me, once I was able to really like start to understand, just, it was more, I was insecure in a lot of ways of like my own, like really actually my own emotions and actually trying to read them through all the things that are happening. But once I started to open up about that, like for me, that changed a lot for me. To be able to operate in that level where I can make decisions, because based upon, the way I'm feeling and understanding those feelings, that to me is really powerful. Because like you said, it's like, it's really quick. It's very intuitive. And if you could use that power, it's like, it's way better than our very logical setup that we rely on so much.
Yes.
That weighs and considers, and then we get caught in this like battle of what's right and what's wrong, and trying to figure it out, because our mind doesn't actually have the capacity to make decisions in that place. It makes decisions where we're talking about right here, right? That's where we make decisions. So yeah, that's huge. Like being able to show up in that way.
Hey, let's take a moment for a brief promotional break. We know you're out there, Seeds of Tao listeners, building businesses that heal the planet and bring communities together. But we also know that the path of a regenerative entrepreneur can be lonely and challenging. Are you looking for a community of like-minded entrepreneurs? A place to learn, grow, and get the support you need to take your impact to the next level? Then we invite you to check out the United Learning Lab. The United Learning Lab is more than just a collection of online courses. It's a thriving ecosystem for regenerative entrepreneurs, impact funders, ecosystem builders, and growth professionals. It's a place where you can connect with a global network of peers who share your values and understand your challenges. It's a place where you can learn from experienced instructors, mentors, and growth professionals through live office hours and actionable guides. And it's a place where you can build a resilient foundation for your regenerative enterprise with courses like Story Seed, which help you harness the power of your story to grow your business, and the Adaptive Way, which equips you with a powerful framework to navigate the complexity with confidence. The United Learning Lab is a sandbox for building a better future. It's a place to test frameworks, share your needs and offers, and co-create new growth strategies. It's an invitation to build alongside us as we lay the groundwork for truly systematic change together. Don't do it alone. Join a community that's actively building regenerative business economies in every bioregion. Ready to unlock the power of your regenerative enterprise? Visit seedsofdow.com/united-learning-lab to learn more and become a member. That's seedsofdow.com/united-learning-lab, or click the link in the description below.
I would love to dive into storytelling mode, Thomas.
Okay.
Because there's a reason why you got involved in this work, and I want to understand that. And I want to understand how it also relates to, for you and your story, how it relates to the regenerative movement and why you're passionate about that as well. So
Sure.
I know it's a part of the story. Let's uncover it and start wherever you'd like.
So, yes, this might be a little circuitous, but it'll be a nice forested path. So, I grew up in a medical and scientific family, and where linear thinking was really, it's what gained approval. I'll say it that way. It's how people were expected to show up, particularly as a male-bodied person. There were certain ways, and being a nonlinear thinker in that family, I really struggled to feel comfortable showing up. So there was always, I'm not enough. That was because it's like, I'm not logical enough. I can't grasp this scientific concept quickly enough. And I also felt that I had to follow, even though I knew from a relatively young age I wasn't going to follow the family into medicine, I knew that it had to be, I felt compelled to follow a technically challenging career path. And so growing up and being mentored in the natural world in many beautiful ways, I knew that if I wasn't going to be doing medicine, it was going to be something related to the environment. So I ended up moving into the policy side of energy, climate, and sustainability.
Okay.
And started my career in DC and got a master's in science. which I found a lot easier than the abstract science that I was required to take to potentially get into medical school. That made a lot of sense to me. And so I was able to really bring that systems approach that I'm naturally wired with as a nonlinear thinker into my work. I worked in 20 countries on 5 continents doing that work. And yet all the way along, I was helping people get comfortable with change, doing things differently, stepping outside their comfort zones. Mm-hmm. And whether that was helping grassroots organizers figure out how to show up in a TV interview for the first time, or a radio interview for the first time, or if that was helping a person who was put in a situation where they had to support a new policy that they weren't sure that the senator or congressperson was going to want to support, and how do they connect it to their district or their state. So it was always helping people get comfortable with change, manage change, or lead through change and flourish. Mm-hmm. And that's really the through line of my entire career. I kept moving that direction, but I also, because the cerebral component was so heavily emphasized in my family, I had a really cerebral leadership style. Huh. And I started to spin my wheels professionally. So I had been in consulting. I spent 10 years doing international management consulting around sustainability, energy efficiency, renewable energy work. And I got to a dead end, basically, and trying to make the shift inside to be that chief sustainability officer or what have you was really challenging. And then 9 years ago, I had a near fatal bicycle accident with a traumatic brain injury, broken clavicle, and broken elbow. Wow. And the second half of 2014 was really about the acute healing. 2015 was proving that I had a brain again. 2016 was proving that my brain could achieve the level of cerebral achievement, for lack of a better word, intellectual achievement that I had before. Because with a mom who's an occupational therapist, I was well aware that with a traumatic brain injury, I might not be able to return to the workforce in the same capacity. Mm. And so, but coming out of that accident, it's not about technology, because technology gets you 15 to 20% of the way there on a good day. Mm. On a good day. What it comes down to is our relationship to ourselves, to each other. And that really echoed, for me, some of the things from biomimicry, thinking about how do you make conditions conducive to life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thinking about social permaculture as much as practical permaculture. And so that's the nexus with regenerative movements. For me is, I understand the science of regenerative ag because I've studied soil science, and the hydrology, and so I can see how that connection works, but it's also thinking about what is our relationship to how we get food, or where our energy comes from, what type of energy, the equity and inclusion that, is distributed there. And so it's, as I mentioned before, coaching allows me to bring all of myself and all of my gifts in and I can share those fully with the world. in a way that I was unable to, sticking myself in somebody else's box.
Mm-hmm. Do you think your accident and then having to, do you think that was also a point for you to also repattern a lot of the way you were thinking? Or how did, when you were going through that? Because I'm not sure. A lot of times we can get stuck in our programming for so very long, and it really does take either a big moment or some type of transition. I rarely see a lot of people do it's always gradual. I shouldn't say that. And it's very habitual in us being able to change mental patterns. But a lot of times there's a catalyst in there of like, we have to be able to change mindset in some way, and injury or some type of transition can lead to that. So how do you think that was? Do you think it was a part of it, or do you not?
Absolutely. I mean, coming out of the accident, certainly even in the acute phase, it was just saying, okay, I have a certain amount, an unknown amount of life energy left. I nearly just died. So how do I want to spend that energy? What is going to give me, a dear friend, we held space for a dear friend in 2016 as she passed from pancreatic cancer. And she was an inspiration to me because she found ways to share all of her gifts with the world. She lived richly. She died with tremendous grace, surrounded by community. And I said, at the end of the day, what's most important? Is it that you have a certain number of zeros after your salary? Is it a certain number of awards on your wall? Like, what is really important? And so for me, it was recognizing, how do I want to share the rest of my life with those around me? And how can I build community? And then that is also, how can I support myself to be able to have the body that will enable me to do that? It's I'm, even 9 years later, I'm still working through retained trauma. But it's, at this point, it's a joyful process because I'm learning so much more about me and my body and how we hold so much in the body, how we, again, going back to how we learn through the body, how we are, what we practice, and recognizing, it's not just the emotion of feeling not enough in my case. It's also, where does that show up in your body? And one of the edges for me right now is trying to figure out what's mine from lived experience and what is inherited. Because I feel like my father shares the same initial trauma and core trauma and shame. That's a story perhaps for another day, but it's really fascinating to start to observe this. And so how do we start to change? The body says yes to practice. So getting back to your question, there was a lot of shift in how I needed to show up for myself, the reliance I had on those around me for care, especially in the first 6 months going through the acute phase. And then it was also just me, okay, how can I support myself going forward to continue to open, to soften, and to become more aware of what's going on in my body? And it took time. It took time. Through my first coaching certification, certainly in hindsight, I chose that so that I could prove that I could coach with the brain. Yeah. And yet looking back on it, I went, oh, wow. Like the level of embodiment I had then compared to where I am now, light years of difference. It's a journey. We're always becoming, to your point, Joshua.
Right. That's That's really great, because I think you added the understanding as well of that. We have these moments in our life, and we can we often can utilize them for uh, great moments of mental shift in our lives that can help us get to greater consciousness and greater understanding and awareness of ourselves, our body, and ability that we have. The and then but it doesn't really, it's not, you're always reinventing and always restarting, and it's about that practice. It's about going the distance with that, right? Understanding. And I noticed just from our conversation that there's some distance that you've traveled in and a journey that you've took yourself on in this awareness of yourself and your emotions in your body, and utilizing what you've learned in somatic coaching. I also recognize there's distance in your understanding in regenerative principles as well. And I kind of want to understand that too, because sustainability and having those pieces there doesn't necessarily mean, because there's a lot of heady work there, but I really do truly believe that regeneration is the movement. It really much aligns with somatic coaching in a lot of ways, because it's becoming more aware. You're looking at systems that a lot of people have neglected for a very long time, that are a part of, what the world that they live in as well. And that's a huge part of regeneration. So was it around the same time, or was it a part of it? How did that come to be as well, the regenerative side of it?
Yes. So one, just the regenerative, your analog between somatics and the regenerative movement. The regenerative movement is talking about the larger body, right? So just recognizing that we are on that larger body. We all walk on that larger body. So for me, so when I first went to DC after college, I thought I was going there to save the wild places. And I quickly realized that you couldn't save the wild places without a rational energy policy. And so that opened the door into energy efficiency, renewable energy. And then right around the time Kyoto was signed, there was a big shift of energy wonks like myself moving into climate and becoming climate wonks, which is no backwards and forwards, literally. And so that's where the word comes from. So I that was that shift, but it was still very heady, to your point. And when I started to have frustration, so I moved to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, in 2007, and I was working with a consulting firm. I helped create the sustainability service offerings, as well as coordinated energy efficiency impact assessments for various utilities across the state per CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission mandate. This was AB 32, Global Warming Solutions Act, signed by then Governor Schwarzenegger. And so again, really heady. But what I started to notice, I thanks to thanks to a friend, someone I met relatively early on in my time here in the Bay Area, I got introduced to Cradle to Cradle and to the biomimicry community. And that really intrigued me, just because it's like, oh, okay, and then what's the biomimicry look like, and how are we starting to ask questions using biomimicry at a regional level? So I was part of the leadership committee for the Bay Area Biomimicry Network. And like, again, what are the conditions conducive to life? What is our relationship to where our food is grown, where our water comes from, how it's used, the infrastructure we have, and the energy we consume, right? So all thinking about all of these different pieces in urban as well as rural land planning, and what's the society we want to have, and just starting to think about all of these different elements. And as I started to dive into this, I started to see that the sustainability community was really most interested in technological fixes on a 3 to 5 year time frame. Well, we replaced the light bulbs in the buildings on campus 5 years ago. We're in a new generation, so let's do that, and we can claim X number of pounds, tons of CO2 savings. Never mind the embedded water, all of the impacts, the embedded carbon in the former generation, right? And never really looking beyond those relatively superficial fixes at fundamental issues. I remember True Cost, which is now part of, I believe, Moody's, doing an assessment of natural capital extraction on the 100 largest companies in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what they discovered was, if that natural capital extraction was on their balance books, most of them would not be profitable, and a few of them would break even.
Huh. Yeah.
And so again, this frustration of why aren't we asking these fundamental questions about the business models, right? Why do we have to keep getting stuck? And there are issues with tax and accounting form structures that were codified in the 1870s. So it's going to have that worldview embedded in it. Same thing with economics. It's embedded with this philosophy, this ethos. And until you break those patterns, it's really hard. So I started getting really frustrated with the sustainability community because it wasn't going far enough.
Right.
And I participated in a leadership called Ecology of Leadership program in 2013 that really that incorporated permaculture into it. And that, so bringing some of the biomimicry along with me, and then starting to see what this ecosystem looks like, and really looking at the social permaculture and what's in our roots, right? Because if you don't cultivate the roots, your canopy as a tree is going to be crap, right? So if it's like you're only going to flourish if the root structure. So what do you need to compost, right? And so that was part of the journey of starting to say, okay, what in my root structure, stuff that I've inherited, stuff that I've lived, stories that I've come to embody. What do I need to compost here so that I can flourish, right? And so that's really what made me start to move towards that. And it's like, we have a possibility here. Like, what does a regenerative community look like? What are the necessary capabilities for people to be able to step into a role where they can have those conversations in their family, in their communities, in local institutions? How can that shift how we show up with each other? And so that was really the genesis of how all of this started to flow for me, was just sort of saying, there's parts here. And that was also reinforced by friends offering some really fascinating books. Charlene Spretnak wrote a book called Relational Reality, and just how everything is relational. And that is I've read the book twice. I've got all these notes in the margins. It's a rich book, but really thinking about, there aren't a lot of leadership books written by women. And then there's also Wilby McNamara, who's done a lot of work around social permaculture out of the UK. So just really admire how they've put things forward. And there are people who are now talking about what that permaculture looks like for particularly folks in the Black community across the US.
This is really a great introspective analysis of your journey, I think. And it's helping us to understand how you kind of came into this cohesive piece of using somatic coaching in the regenerative realm and understanding of regeneration. I think, and it's probably helpful to start having this conversation as well. That there is a really good union if we can start to understand ourselves and how we interact. That also helps us to understand how others interact and are or are not interacting with the world and showing up in the ways that maybe they want to or could potentially as we build relationships and collaborations and whatnot. But you're talking about social permaculture, and its help and usefulness. I know we have listeners that really deeply understand it as well. But we also, and we've had plenty of guests that have spoken to it. But just for a moment, help us to kind of relate social permaculture to the work that you're doing as a coach as well.
So you can apply social permaculture to multiple levels, right? I mean, if you're talking at the organizational level first, you can say, how is this organization, how is the energy flowing in this organization? How is it relating to its environment, its ecosystem? And, that's one of the first things you do in permaculture. You're looking at a plot of land, when you're saying, okay, how does energy flow through here? How does water flow through here? How does the sun fall? What wants to grow where? Why? And being able to see what is doing, how that relates, if something wants full sun versus partial shade versus full shade, right? What becomes possible, and how can you make something that flourishes as a polyculture? Because that's really what, so that's kind of what an organization is, what a community is. It's polyculture. And some things, say kids, right? They're understory, right? Because, and they're understory creatures. And so it's like, how do you, like, some, yes, they need sun, and yet, but most of the time, like there's an environment in which they can thrive and they can grow until they're strong enough perhaps to take the full sun. And so it's like, how do you nurture that? How do you water it? How do you allow nature to take care of itself, right? Because this is something that I remember even back from my days when I was first introduced to biomimicry, is nature moves towards healing. That's true for us as humans. But we also have to give it space to do that. And so if you move from the larger perspective of the community or the organization, and you bring it back down to an individual, how are you giving space to this individual to feel connected to the other beings around it? How are you nurturing it? What nutrients does it need to really thrive? And what supports that? right? So when I'm working with a client, I'm looking at the whole human. It's a developmental approach. So I'm like, what is going to help this person come in greater contact with themselves so that they can achieve this commitment to their future self? That may take them a year, 2 years, whatever it happens to be, to move towards that. Right? Because again, we're saying yes to practice. So what are the practices that are going to start somebody saying, oh, just for example, yesterday, working with a client, we did something. We've been working together now 6 months and doing something that we've done numerous times. She discovered a new level of awareness for herself. And it's like, oh, wow. I thought I had been centering, but this is a completely different experience. And now I know this is what I need to benchmark against in terms of, am I centered? Because all of a sudden she noticed that her brain was quiet. She noticed that she could feel her feet in a different way, that she could feel supported in her pelvic bowl in a completely different way. It's like, oh, so now you're connected to the earth.
That's great. The way that you kind of described the kind of personal feeling and understanding, and related it back to, and I really enjoyed how you look at children as the understory, they need that space, they need to be able to foster, but then you're also looking at the level of community and what that person, like the forest and this little sapling of a tree, this child or whatever, or just this individual tree itself and its process and what its interaction is in this greater forest, this greater, and if you're looking at that with your coaching and the way that this person is a part of this whole here, this community, you're understanding how they interact and interweave, and that allows you, if you provide the space and understanding, when they step into their true self or a higher consciousness of themselves, they are able to then show up in their space in a more productive, in a more healing way, right? A more regenerative way. So that really does resonate with me, or at least it helps me to understand more fully how somatic coaching can be beneficial to us in our work and be a huge piece to the social permaculture side of it, which is all these invisible structures that we're witnessing in our day-to-day lives and interact with our organizations, our community, our culture, how we're interacting with them and how we're able to maybe best show up to get the work done of regenerating our soils, reducing the effects of climate challenges. We started this off with you and I talking about fires, right? And the challenges that you're having in our areas. Well, we can't really make those changes or even truly get to a point where we can start understanding what needs to be done unless we do that first inner work and then move into showing up in our environment in certain ways, in real ways. So I want to start us off on our last conversation for the podcast, and that it's always a conversation that brings it back to the entrepreneurs that are listening to this podcast. They are a certain type. They are working on systems change, and they're very systematic in doing so. They're a regenerative entrepreneur, right? What would you hope for them as they've listened to your story and got a better understanding of the work that you're doing? What would you hope for them to take away from your message and the story that you've shared today?
The one, from where are you sourcing the energy for your work? You know, when I was in DC, my first boss commented to me that he was surprised because he noticed that I wasn't sourcing from anger, like rage against the machine, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And after he said that to me, I looked around at colleagues and collaborators, and I was like, wow, he's right. There are a lot of people here who are sourcing from anger. And this is why they look ancient at 40. Because it's just this, right, the entire time. And so how is that supportive for you as a human? And what do you need to do to be regenerative in yourself? Because I believe in my work that the leaders I'm working with need to model the change they want to be they want to see in the world in the first place, right? So how can you be that change? And what is the inner work you need to do so that this can be more than just a cerebral exercise?
Yes.
Because it's not just, well, I'm fighting the good fight, so I'm a good person. It's like, well, okay, yes. And what is really happening inside of you? How are you relating to this? Or what's this, going back to your core narratives? What are they, right? Are you fighting this from, I'm not enough, or if I do this really well, I'll get approval? You know, whatever the story happens to be for you, it's just recognizing, can you stand centered and extend your effort into the world? Because that's really also how you're going to be able to maintain your boundaries. And, you know, that leads me to the third point, which is, what are you doing to practice resilience? We hear a lot of stories around, oh, I'm a really resilient person, but that's requiring you to use resilience. And resilience is that innate sense of calm and coherence. It's innate. That provides or provokes a positive outlook or imagination for the future. But we can practice that, and that is replenishing. So what are you doing to replenish your reserves so that you can extend calmly into that vision of change that you want to see, and also not feel like you're constantly exhausted from the effort?
I really do hope this is resonating with the entrepreneurs, because I'm thinking of myself and at different points, and even in this exact moment, on the micro scale, like on the macro, I get it. I totally get it. And I try to apply it in my life in so many ways. But on the micro scale, in the day to day, when it shows up and I see the patterns that are not healthy, right? My anxiety is ticked from a certain challenge, and where I'm gathering my energy is because I'm anxiety ridden and I need to get this done. And so I try to throw myself into it, and that energy in itself, like that, the micro stuff is really what is adding up in me. And then when something big in my life happens, I'm noticing in so many ways that I don't or wasn't doing the work, right? that I needed to in order to build resilience into my life, to take from that fountain of energy that can really lead me into the next part. Because then I get hit with a big challenge in my life. For me, it's in this moment I'm struggling with death, right? Of friends and family, and trying to understand, work through those emotions. But then you're going through your day to day, and then you realize when you get hit with these big moments that there's something that's missing, or something, that a practice that you're missing, or that you're needing to better step into. For me, resilience is huge, and it really does hit to me. So thank you for sharing that, and just kind of starting off with the understanding of, like, where am I? How am I showing up? Right? Where's that energy coming from? Is huge.
Absolutely. And the quality, there's a lot of efficiency messaging in our society.
Yes.
And one of the things I learned early on, especially through the conversation around biomimicry and permaculture, is more about effectiveness. Nature is not inherently efficient, but it is about effectiveness. It is about equitable share. And so just keeping that in mind too, and just saying, okay, how am I showing up? Because even as, it's one thing to talk about systemic change and resilience. It's another thing too, just to be on this entrepreneurial journey and to be constantly pulled out of your zone of comfort. You're like, I just got comfortable being seen this way or being able to do that. And it's like, and now, I'm pulled out into, more challenges in a different way, because that's the next step, because that's what the business is asking of you. And so how do we take care of ourselves, cultivating that resilience? How do we come back to center, right? The more you come back to center, the faster and easier it becomes. But it's not a destination, it's a dynamic state. And we just need to keep that in mind, right? Just like the balance of any plot of land, right? And just being able to say, okay, so, and then thinking about too, how are you sending signals to others? Think about the mycelium.
Yeah. There's a coach that's been in my life, that's helped me through some deep struggles and trauma, and noticing how I was throwing that out onto others, right? And causing greater trauma, sticking the what's the Asian of the second arrow or the third arrow, right? Where you get, there's the first arrow of the injury that happens from the attack or whatever, and then there's the second and third arrow that you either take yourself or you even throw back out and hit someone else with, right? And it's a bunch of these wounds. And the lesson that I kind of gathered from that understanding is well, first recognizing when that's happening, right? When you're throwing it out onto someone else, whether it's a colleague, and we do it to the ones that we're closest to first, but even then it affects the ability for you, even if it's only showing up in your personal life and you behave completely different in your professional setting or whatever, it's still implicating and affecting the work that you're able to do and how you're able to do it, in so many ways, let alone just the fact of feeling and knowing that you're at the cause of some of the challenges and trauma that's is someone else is now someone else's, right? Beyond your own. So I think that's a huge piece to relate. And I think in the regenerative work, it's something that we can't, we have to really truly understand how it's affecting one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this has been a wonderful conversation. It's gotten me to think in a lot of different directions as well. And I think we covered a lot here. There are some last questions that I want to ask you.
Yes.
To make sure that if others are working through these types of understandings,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to have greater control of their own body, emotions, and making decisions from that space, how do they get involved with your work? How do we reach out? What are some of the things that are going on in your coaching? Do you have programs and different other educational pieces? How do we stay in touch with what you're doing?
Sure. So the easiest, my website is regenerate.coach. And so you can certainly go there. You can learn more about what I'm offering. There's a contact form there. You could also just reach out to connect@regenerate.coach. And I am active on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So you can, if you just type in Regenerate Coaching for Facebook, and it's Regenerate Coach 8, I think, on Instagram. And then my full name, LinkedIn, it's there is a LinkedIn business page, but my full name, Thomas Loxley Rosenberg, on LinkedIn, and would love to connect and chat with anybody who is curious about exploring this, because it's important to have a chemistry call with whatever coach you choose to work with. And so that first call is free, and it's just for us to get to know each other and to understand what you're seeking. I typically work with clients individually for approximately a year. So it's 6 months of biweekly sessions, either in person or online, and then 3 follow-on sessions over the following 6 months at 1, 3, and 6 months out. I've had clients who figured out partway through that follow-up series that they need additional support, and so we figure out, what that looks like. But yeah, pretty flexible otherwise. And with teams, I typically work in cohorts of 10, especially when online, because it's much easier to manage that. And it's either weekly or biweekly, depending on what folks want to work on. And it's minimum of 6 months. Okay,
great. So there's both a group coaching aspect of this, and also
team coaching. Specifically team of peers. So it might be all C-suite or all VPs or all directors, because in smaller mid-sized firms, sometimes people are called directors and not VPs. And so the title's a little fungible, but it's not like a leader with his direct reports, because with power dynamics, it becomes a little more challenging. So in that situation, I might work with the individual first and then see how that cascades down. But yeah, typically I'm working with those who are all peers in that cohort of 10.
Okay.
And so that's different than the distinction I make with group coaching is a bunch of individuals who want to be in community on an individual journey.
Right.
Whereas a team, and it might be coming from different organizations or different walks of life. A team is really within one organization with that organizational culture and collaboration at the forefront.
Perfect. That's a great distinction, and two completely different services when you look at it, right?
Yes.
So, yes, thank you. So if you're looking for those listening, if you're looking for opportunities for you to improve your team's ability to make decisions and to do it in ways that are understanding the body, the feeling in these somatic ways, please, I think we need more of this in our organizations. And if you're personally, if you're the entrepreneur that's trying to move towards greater understanding, better ability to make decisions, reach out to Thomas as well. We will have those pieces in our show notes so that they can get in touch with you. Thanks again for being on the podcast. We really truly enjoy having our coaching our coaches here more than ever. I think we lack that in our ability to make change, having a coach. And if you don't have a coach, get out there, get a coach. Always have a coach. I have subscribed to that for a really long time, is to always have a coach that I'm working with in one area of my life at least. And that has transformed my ability to show up in the right capacities as an entrepreneur. All right. Thanks again, Thomas. And thanks again, everybody else that's joined us today.
Thank you, Joshua. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Bye for now. Ciao.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and it really is a blessing and a pleasure to bring each episode to you. So what'd you think? If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review or follow us on the podcast platform of your choice. Each review really does help us further the reach of this podcast and move our mission forward to build regenerative economies in every bioregion. If you have a suggestion or feedback for us, please let us know in the open and free Regenerative Business Economies ecosystem, known as RegenB, which is linked in the description and in the show notes of this episode. RegenB also has an awesome community request form that allows you to suggest guests, register to be a guest on the podcast, and share your own regenpreneur startup story or any other suggestion you might have for the community. Without your feedback and requests, this podcast and community wouldn't be what it is, so please let us know. Now, this may be bye for now, but remember, it doesn't end here. It has only just begun. The regenerative economies of the future start now with you.